All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're doing a full post-mortem on the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. For those of us in the OT space, this wasn't just another headline. It became a defining case study. Here's how we're going to break this down. We'll start with the massive real-world impact. Then, we'll rewind and pinpoint the single technical failure that started it all. After that, we'll dissect the ransomware and the group behind it, look at the bigger systemic flaws this whole thing exposed, and then wrap up with the critical lessons for building real resilience.
So, first things first, let's just get a handle on the sheer scale of the disruption. I mean, people weren't exaggerating when they called this a Pearl Harbor moment for cybersecurity.
And this quote from Chris Inglis, it just nails the situation at the time, doesn't it? Our cyber defenses were basically a soccer team with no goalie. The attackers were just taking shot after shot, and they were landing them. We were playing a completely reactive game.
Now, we all know why this specific target was so devastating. Colonial isn't just a pipeline, it's the energy jugular for the entire U.S. East Coast. We're talking about 45% of all fuel. So when you take it offline, you're not just causing a problem, you're guaranteeing immediate and widespread chaos.
And that chaos hit fast. The shutdown triggered instant panic buying, and the result was over 12,000 gas stations running completely dry. This is the moment a cyber attack stops being about bits and bytes and becomes a very real, very physical crisis for millions of people.
Okay, so now for the part that keeps us up at night. How did this all start? How did they get in? Well, all of that disruption we just talked about, it all began with a surprisingly and frankly pretty embarrassingly simple entry point.
So the breach itself happened on the IT network. It hit their billing system. But the crucial decision, the one that caused the panic, was to shut down the OT side. Why? Because Colonial couldn't be sure the malware couldn't jump from the IT network to the industrial controls. It's a textbook case of an IT risk forcing a complete shutdown of physical operations. And here's the attack chain. It is infuriatingly basic. Step 1, a compromised password for an old VPN account, probably bought for pennies on the dark web. Step 2, they use it to log in. Step 3, and this is the killer, that account had no multi-factor authentication. And just like that, Step 4, they were in. That's it.
Let that just sink in for a minute. A single password for a dormant, unused account that should have been decommissioned ages ago. That was the key that unlocked a national infrastructure crisis. It's just a brutal reminder that poor cyber hygiene on one forgotten asset can bring everything down.
Okay, so we know how they got in, but who was they? Let's profile the adversary here and take a look at their playbook.
The dwell time here is really telling. The attackers got initial access way back on April 29th. The ransom note didn't even drop until May 7th. That's over a week they had inside the network to look around, steal data, almost 100 gigs of it, and plan their final move before anybody knew they were there.
The adversary here was DarkSide, a well-known ransomware as a service group. Their motive was purely financial. In fact, they later put out a bizarre public apology for the chaos, which suggests this attack was likely carried out by one of their affiliates, someone who didn't quite realize they were hitting the third rail of American infrastructure.
You know, this incident was so much bigger than just one company making a mistake. It really ripped the curtain back and exposed massive systemic vulnerabilities and how the U.S. protects all of its critical infrastructure. One of the biggest issues is this tangled mess of regulatory oversight. It's like a loose quilt of different agencies. You've got the TSA, supposedly handling security, FERC handling rates, PHMSA handling safety. But when responsibility is spread that thin, it creates dangerous gaps.
And here's the critical difference. You look at the electric grid, and FERC enforces mandatory, explicit cybersecurity standards. If you don't comply, there are penalties. But for pipelines, security under the TSA was based on voluntary guidelines. This attack proved once and for all that voluntary measures are just not going to cut it.
And if you want to see why that voluntary system failed, just look at this table. It's just staggering. In 2019, the agency in charge of securing all national pipelines had only 5 full-time employees in that division. And the real shocker? 0 of them had documented cybersecurity expertise. 0.
All right, so enough about what went wrong. Let's shift gears and talk about the path forward. How do we actually build resilience? And what are the real actionable takeaways from this disaster?
You know, the truly frustrating thing is that this entire catastrophe could have been prevented by just doing the basics right. We're talking about rigorous enforcement of MFA,
proper network segmentation to create a real barrier between IT and OT, and a disciplined patching schedule. It's not sexy, it's not advanced AI, but it's what actually works.
Now, beyond the basics, this attack really lit a fire under the industry-wide push towards zero-trust architectures, especially in OT. The core idea is a complete shift in mindset away from the old castle and moat security. The new principle is simple: never trust, always verify. Every user, every device has to prove it belongs, every single time.
Ultimately, this whole thing leaves us with a really critical question for the future of OT security. Our big push is for more connectivity, right? Smart grids, IIoT, remote access, all designed for efficiency. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, are we building a more resilient system, or are we just creating a much larger, more fragile attack surface? That's the challenge we have to solve.